Victoria Sponge. Victoria Sponge was born in the Midwest town of Poverty sometime between January the 1st, 1832 and December the 31st, 1973. The exact date of her birth is known, but it is not interesting enough to be specified. What is almost partially semi-interesting is that Sponge's early years were spent living in a tiny palatial mansion in a small area of Chattanooga, Tennessee, known as Goose Ass Hollow. The mansion was shared by 1.5 of her parents and 2/3 of her sister. Her father, a part-time eunuch and much-loved fictional character, spontaneously combusted when Victoria was a baby, and by the time she reached her first birthday, 1/4 of her mother and 3/5 of her sister had died, or at least claimed to be dead. Victoria's imaginary friend, Charlotte Apple, assumed responsibility for running the household and showed such aptitude for the job that within 6 months she had run it completely into the ground. Charlotte then moved the remainder of the family into a cubicle in a public toilet in an area of Chattanooga known as Dizzy Heights. She supported Victoria by picking and selling scraps of food which had not been fully flushed from the toilet bowl in her cubicle, and by running a hugely profitable international business empire whenever time allowed. Despite the abject wealth that overwhelmed Victoria Sponge's childhood, she is reported to have starved to death on at least 3 occasions, and narrowly escaped death once by eating her own teeth. During this time, Victoria is also said to have begun her showbiz career, hopping on one leg and whistling, while Charlotte collected spare change, shoes, and other missiles that annoyed passers-by threw at them. In 1812, the Fanny Stinks Menstrual Minstrel Troupe visited Chattanooga and auditioned Victoria in order to make fun of her. Within 15 minutes of the audition, the young Sponge had taken over the troupe and began a tour which lasted more than 3 weeks, travelling as far east as Mistakey, Oklahoma, and as far east as Elastic City, Old Cardi. About this or some other time, she married and then met a member of the troupe named Eros Loveplay and settled into a routine of domestic bliss, which lasted almost 4 days. Tragically, or fortunately, depending on who's telling the story, Loveplay died shortly before the marriage was consummated, or during the act of consummation, depending on who's telling the story. And Victoria resumed her career with a newfound vigour and a hefty life insurance payout. As Victoria Sponge was honing her craft, a young sister named Mimsy Borogrove was achieving great critical and commercial success with recordings such as Wring It Out and Squeeze It Dry, which sold almost 19 copies within the first decade of its release, and several of the leading phonograph companies soon realised that there was a market for rude songs by women with stupid-sounding names. Off the Records talent scout, Gunther the Cunt Chunter, first saw Victoria Sponge on stage at the Dyer Theatre, Warrabummer, in 1887, and immediately began to record her. This annoyed the young Sponge, as she was only painting the scenery at the time, and wasn't even singing while she was doing it. Nevertheless, the recording session was a huge success, and produced Sponge's first hit, Stop Recording Me While I'm Painting the Scenery, which sold almost an entire copy within the first year of its release. Over the next 60 years, Victoria Sponge went on to record an almost unbelievable 4 records, appeared in, or watched, depending on who's telling the story, 3 films, wrote rude words inside the pages of 7 novels, and performed at no less than 2 of the largest theatres in Warrabummer. It is possible that Sponge might have gone on to become one of the most prolific artists of the 23rd century had she lived long enough. But in 2038, she succumbed to a bout of death and stopped living. With changes in fashion, taste, and good old common sense, Victoria Sponge's popularity waned towards the end of her life and finally died with her when she popped her clogs. Her grave remained unmarked for more than 20 years, until in 2058 a stray dog pissed on it.